4:47 a.m. Bledsoe County, Tennessee. 3 unmarked SUVs turned off State Route 30 onto a gravel access road. No lights. Engines idling below 40 miles per hour. The lead vehicle stopped 200 yards short of a weathered farmhouse set back from a tree line of bare November oaks. The agents inside had been staged at a county highway pullout since 3:15 a.m. They had eaten nothing. They had spoken very little. In the back of the second SUV, a tactical medic named Torres had checked his bag twice and was now checking it a third time. Special Agent Dana Cortez keyed her radio. One word: stack. 12 agents moved into position in the pre-dawn dark. Their breath fogged in the cold air. The temperature had dropped to 28 degrees overnight, and the gravel underfoot was laced with thin frost that crunched faintly with each step. Behind them, a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation K-9 unit held at the tree line. Farther east, corrections officers at Whitfield State Penitentiary were moving through a cell block with a federal transfer warrant and a pair of bolt cutters. 2 operations. 1 file. 1 phone number that should not have existed. 7 adults were somewhere inside that farmhouse. They had been there for 49 days. Nobody outside a rural Bledsoe County drug network knew that until a utility worker read a meter on a Tuesday afternoon in late November and noticed something impossible. The operation that morning would reach from a converted milking parlor behind a false wall to a prison cell with a contraband phone still buzzing with unanswered orders. 11 federal indictments. 49 days. 1 power bill. This is how it unraveled. Marcus Hollis drove a Tennessee Valley Authority service truck. For 11 years, he had worked residential and rural metering routes in Sequatchie and Bledsoe counties. He knew every gravel lane, every rusted gate, every property that had gone dark after the 2022 foreclosure wave swept through the valley. He knew which vacant parcels had been stripped of copper wiring within a week of abandonment and which sat untouched for years, with utility accounts bleeding phantom loads from refrigerators nobody had bothered to unplug. 11 years on the same routes had taught him instinct. He could spot anomaly without thinking about it. On November 18, 2025, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Hollis pulled his truck onto a gravel lot beside a 2-story farmhouse on a parcel registered to First Covenant Rural Bank as bank-owned property. The address: a numbered county road off the Route 30 corridor, south of Pikeville. The property had been vacant on record since February 2024. Foreclosure finalized. No listed occupants. A rusted mailbox with no name, and the flag stuck permanently upright. The exterior showed ordinary decay, paint peeling from the window trim, a section of gutter sagging at the roofline, a front porch step that had cracked and separated from the riser board. His job was routine. Read the external meter. Log the number. Move on. He read the number. He stopped. The meter had advanced 11,400 kilowatt hours in the previous 31-day billing cycle. For a vacant, bank-owned, single-family rural structure, the expected draw was near zero. Ghost accounts on foreclosed properties occasionally showed minor phantom loads, a forgotten chest freezer, a malfunctioning sump pump. Those drew between 40 and 120 kilowatt hours per month. 11,400 was not a freezer. 11,400 was a commercial operation. Hollis photographed the meter. He noted the reading in his log. Then he drove to the end of the lane, sat in his truck, and called his direct supervisor at the TVA district office in Dayton. While he waited for the call to connect, he looked back at the property from the road. All the ground floor windows were curtained. The lot was empty of vehicles. There was no sound of equipment running. Nothing that from the outside would tell you anything was happening inside. "I've got a vacant foreclosure drawing industrial power," he said, "and I don't see any equipment outside that would explain it." His supervisor told him to flag it internally as a potential unauthorized connection and forward the parcel data to the account verification team. Standard procedure for meter anomalies. Hollis did exactly that. Then, because he had 11 years of rural routes and a memory for properties that did not behave as they should, he added one line to his internal flag: possible occupancy. No visible exterior activity. Curtains drawn on all ground floor windows. No vehicles in lot at time of visit. That flag moved through 3 desks before it reached a Bledsoe County Sheriff's Office duty sergeant named Claire Weston. TVA utility anomalies on vacant foreclosures occasionally indicated illegal cannabis cultivation, unauthorized squatting, or industrial theft. All 3 were sheriff's business. Weston ran the parcel. Bank-owned since February 2024. No outstanding occupancy permits. No utilities transferred to any named tenant. She cross-referenced the address against active missing persons files as a matter of routine. No match. She ran it against the county's known narcotics distribution network list, a quarterly intelligence digest shared with the 8th Judicial District Task Force. No direct match. She forwarded it to the task force liaison with a note: anomalous power draw on vacant rural parcel, possible narcotics activity. The task force liaison was a DEA Nashville field office agent named Robert Keene. Keene read the note at 7:42 a.m. on November 19th. He set it aside. Then he pulled it back. Because Keene already had a file open on a property network in Bledsoe County. A file that had been building for 61 days. A file that had started not in Tennessee at all, but inside a federal penitentiary. What surprised Keene about this case wasn't that a meth distribution ring was being run from inside a prison. That happens. Federal records document it going back years. What surprised him was how long it took for 2 separate investigations, one running from inside a cell block, one triggered by a power bill, to find each other. They were looking at the same network from opposite ends. For 61 days, neither side knew the other existed. The prison-side investigation had started with a wiretap. In late September 2025, a confidential informant inside Whitfield State Penitentiary approached a TBI special agent with information about an inmate running a drug distribution enterprise using multiple contraband phones. The inmate, a man serving a 14-year sentence on a prior federal trafficking conviction, housed in a medium-security cell block in the facility's East Wing. Call him Garrett Cole in this reconstruction. Name invented. The role is real. Cole had been incarcerated since 2022. According to the informant, Cole had not stopped working. He had simply changed his operating method. He used 2 contraband smartphones, both concealed in the cell block, and cycled regularly to avoid detection sweeps. He conducted distribution logistics from his cell, placing orders, coordinating pickup points, resolving disputes, directing cash movement. The outside operation was managed by a crew of 10 people, family members, former associates, 2 individuals recruited specifically for their ability to move product through rural Middle Tennessee without drawing attention. TBI requested a federal wiretap through the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Tennessee. The application was approved on October 2, 2025. DEA Nashville was brought in as the lead federal agency given the interstate trafficking scope. Over the next 53 days, agents logged over 400 intercepts across the 2 phone lines attributed to Cole's cell block. The picture was clear. Cole's network distributed methamphetamine through 4 rural distribution nodes in a corridor running from Grundy County northeast through Bledsoe and into Rhea County. Product moved in quantities between 1 and 4 pounds per transaction. Street-side distribution was handled by the outer crew. Revenue was collected in cash and cycled back through informal transfers. What agents couldn't find as of mid-November was the exact location of the main packaging site. Intercepts mentioned the farm in coded language. Agents had linked the phrase to an area south of Pikeville. but they hadn't pinned down an address. Then Keene read Weston's note about the power spike on a vacant foreclosure near that same corridor. He pulled up the parcel data. When he cross-referenced the address against his intercept map, it matched within a half-mile of where he'd been looking for 3 weeks. Keene walked to his supervisor's office with the TVA flag in one hand and a printed intercept summary in the other. "I think we have the farm," he said. His supervisor looked at both documents. "Get me a surveillance request." The surveillance request was filed and approved the same day. Agents began fixed observation of the Bledsoe County parcel on November 21, 2025, 3 days after Hollis had read the meter. What they observed over the following 6 days expanded the scope of the case. The farm was not a standard distribution stash house. It was an operation. Daily activity didn't match simple product storage patterns. Vehicles arrived and departed on a regular schedule, typically between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., never during daylight hours, never more than 2 vehicles at a time. The vehicles were domestic pickup trucks and one older model cargo van, all with Tennessee plates. Agents logged plate numbers and ran them through NENSIC. Several returned to individuals already present in DEA case files as peripheral associates of the Bledsoe network. Lights were active at unusual hours, frequently between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., when even a productive, legitimate rural operation would have gone dark. Thermal imaging under a separate warrant showed a significant heat signature consistent with an enclosed, occupied workspace in the structure's rear section, consistent with a converted agricultural outbuilding connected to the main farmhouse. The power draw made sense now. An enclosed workspace with ventilation, lighting, climate control, and equipment. Operational around the clock. The intercepts had told agents that Cole directed a distribution enterprise. Surveillance revealed the farm was active production and packaging at scale, not just a staging point. That distinction mattered legally. It moved the indictment from distribution to manufacturing and distribution. Different charge architecture. Higher sentencing exposure. But something else in the surveillance data demanded a different conversation. On November 24th, a surveillance agent logged a detail in her field report in flat, institutional language. 7 to 9 individuals observed in rear outbuilding through thermal imaging. Movement patterns inconsistent with voluntary workers. Individuals do not appear to leave structure independently. No egress observed during 48-hour window. Keene read that field note 3 times. He called the TBI liaison. "How many people do you have in that building?" Thermal shows 7 confirmed. Possibly 8. And none of them leave. Not in 48 hours of continuous observation. Not independently. Do we have any intelligence on who they are? Silence on the line. Then we're running it. The answer came back within 20 hours through a DEA HSI joint query. A Nashville area labor contractor operating informal day labor placement for construction and roofing crews had reported to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in early October 2025 that 7 individuals recruited for a roofing project in the Chattanooga corridor had not returned from a job assignment. The contractor had provided the recruitment contact number as part of the ICE administrative notification. That contact number was in the DEA intercept file. It had appeared twice in calls to Cole's cellblock phone. Put yourself in Keene's position. You have a drug manufacturing operation. A prison organizer running it by contraband phone. And now evidence suggesting 7 adults, men recruited on false job promises, have been held at that location for going on 7 weeks. The charge matrix changes completely. This was no longer only a narcotics case. Keene picked up his phone and called the assistant special agent in charge. "We need a coordinated entry," he said. "Farm and the prison simultaneously. The second we breach the farm, Cole's phone goes dark or someone tips him. If he has time to make a call, evidence inside that cell block disappears." The ASAC agreed. He began coordinating with TBI and the Whitfield facility warden. Planning a simultaneous raid on the farm and the prison took 11 days. 2 separate warrant packages. 2 separate briefings. 1 synchronized timeline. The goal was to leave no window for Cole's network to communicate. During those 11 days, surveillance of the Bledsoe farmhouse continued without interruption. The 7 individuals remained in the rear structure. Power draw did not decrease. On 2 occasions, agents observed what appeared to be a single individual exiting the rear structure briefly, escorted, never alone, back inside within minutes. The agents documented each observation. Each added weight to the forced labor characterization already forming in the warrant application. Here's the part that doesn't sit right, even now. During those 11 days of planning, agents knew with reasonable certainty that 7 adults were being held at that location against their will. They could see the heat signatures. They could read the intercepts that referenced workers in language, carrying no ambiguity once you understood the context. The decision to wait, to build the full case, synchronize the prison extraction, and hit both targets at once was legally and tactically sound. One premature move on the farm, and Cole destroys evidence in his cell. The manufacturing conspiracy charge becomes much harder to prove. The case collapses on its most serious count. The cost of that calculus was 11 more days for 7 people inside that converted milking parlor. We'll say plainly what the case file leaves implicit. That is a hard call. Not a wrong one by the standards of federal prosecution strategy, but a hard one. During the planning interval, agents pursued one avenue that the formal case record addresses only briefly. A TBI analyst was assigned to reconstruct the individual histories of the 7 men believed to be held at the farm, using the IC administrative notification as a starting point. What she assembled over 4 days of records queries and informal interviews with the labor contractor was a partial portrait that the grand jury would later hear described in the opening of the forced labor count. The 7 men ranged in age from 24 to 32. Several had been working informal construction and roofing placement in the Nashville and Chattanooga corridors for between 1 and 3 years. Most had been recruited through word-of-mouth referrals. Someone they knew had worked a job through the placement contact and vouched for it. The offer was specific: $40 per hour, cash paid weekly, 4 to 6 weeks of roofing work on residential contracts in the Chattanooga corridor. Transportation provided. The men were told to bring work clothes and boots and whatever they needed for a month away from the city. They were picked up at a staging point in Nashville on separate days in late September and early October 2025. They were driven south. The route they traveled did not go to Chattanooga. The analyst noted in her summary that each of the 7 men had a network of people who would have noticed they were gone: family members, roommates, other workers from jobs they'd worked alongside. The ICE notification from the labor contractor had been the only formal report. Informal inquiries made to the contractor's contact number after the men failed to return had gone unanswered. None of the families had filed missing persons reports, for reasons the case file does not fully explore, but which are not difficult to imagine for people whose relationship with official institutions is defined primarily by risk. The analyst's summary was included in the warrant application supporting the forced labor charge. It was one of the documents that convinced the reviewing magistrate to approve the simultaneous entry structure without requiring a preliminary welfare check, which would have telegraphed the operation to Cole's network. Warrant packages were finalized on December 3, 2025. Tactical briefing for the farm entry was conducted on December 4th by DEA Nashville SWAT in coordination with TBI agents. The Whitfield Corrections extraction was planned separately by TBI Special Operations and Facility Security personnel. Both teams were given identical go time, 4:45 a.m., December 5th, 2025. The command decision was to launch from a common radio signal rather than a clock time. Keene would call the farm breach. The moment his team confirmed entry, the prison extraction team would move. There was a single 30-second communication window between the two operations. 30 seconds to prevent Cole from making one phone call that could compromise the farm entry or trigger evidence destruction inside the facility. One complication surfaced at 11:50 p.m. on December 4th, 47 minutes before the final briefing concluded. A thermal imaging pass on the farmhouse showed a vehicle that had not been present in the prior surveillance cycle parked in the east lot. One additional vehicle, unidentified. The vehicle could mean one additional person on site. It could mean a routine delivery. It could mean the outer crew had increased its footprint at the farm for an unknown reason. The entry plan had accounted for up to 6 exterior personnel based on surveillance patterns. One unknown additional vehicle changed the perimeter math. The SWAT team leader, a DEA agent named Eric Salas, in this reconstruction, made the call, adjust the outer perimeter to add 2 agents on the east approach. The K-9 unit, already staged at the tree line, would expand its sweep to the east lot before the breach team moved. No change to entry time. The adjustment took 12 minutes to communicate and confirm across all units. At 4:45 a.m., all teams reported ready. Keene gave the signal. 4:47 a.m. The convoy rolled. The lead SUV reached the farmhouse perimeter in under 90 seconds from the staging point. Breach team deployed on foot for the final 200 yards. Standard noise discipline on rural entry. The frost on the gravel was heavier than it had been during afternoon surveillance runs. Each footfall required deliberate placement. The K-9 handler moved the dog along the east fence line in a low, wide arc, quartering the lot as the 2 additional agents fanned out to cover the east approach. The dog worked silently and without hesitation, nose low to the frost-covered ground. The front door was a standard residential steel core with a deadbolt. Breacher cleared it in one application. Entry team moved through on stack. Ground floor, clear. Staging area with commercial scales, packaging materials, and heat-sealed supply bags. Evidence flagged, not touched. The smell inside was chemical and close. The particular combination of solvent residue and sealed plastic and recirculated air that agents working these sites describe as unmistakable once you have encountered it. Entry team moved to the rear toward the internal access point to the converted agricultural section. The access point was not on the original farmhouse plan. It had been constructed, rough carpentry, recently done, as an internal passageway from the farmhouse proper into what had been a detached milking parlor. The passageway ran through what appeared from the outside to be a feed storage room. The feed storage room had a false interior wall with a locking mechanism on the far side. The locking mechanism was padlocked from the outside. Bolt cutters. 14 seconds. The false wall swung open. Behind it, the milking parlor, converted. A space roughly 40 feet by 20 feet. Low-wattage industrial lighting hung from repurposed ceiling fixtures. The concrete floor had been swept but not cleaned. Residue accumulated in the corners and along the baseboards. Industrial ventilation fans were bolted to 2 exterior wall panels, their hum the only sound in the space when the door opened. 7 adults, ages 24 through 32, on cots or seated on the concrete floor. All male. All alive. None in life-threatening condition, according to the on-scene medical team that arrived within 4 minutes of the breach. The men did not rush the door when it opened. Several did not move at first. One stood immediately and then stopped, as though uncertain whether movement was permitted. The tactical medic Torres moved through the opening ahead of the others, hands visible, his voice low and steady, identifying himself by role rather than agency. It took approximately 90 seconds before any of the 7 men spoke. The first to speak asked, in Spanish, whether they were being arrested. Torres told him no. EMS had staged at the county road. They were through the front door and to the rear structure before Salas's team had finished clearing the upper floor. 7 men. recruited in Nashville and Chattanooga on promises of roofing work in October 2025. Missing for 49 days. Held in a converted agricultural structure behind a false wall in a foreclosed Tennessee Valley farmhouse, doing packaging work for a methamphetamine distribution network run by a man in a prison cell 63 miles north. Each received immediate medical evaluation on scene. Condition consistent with prolonged confinement, weight loss, vitamin deficiency indicators, skin conditions consistent with limited hygiene access. No life-threatening injuries. No acute trauma requiring emergency intervention. All 7 were transported to a regional medical facility for comprehensive evaluation. At the same moment agents broke that padlock in Bledsoe County, TBI officers and Whitfield facility security personnel were moving through the East Wing cell block with measured precision. The cell block was quiet at that hour. Most inmates were asleep. The TBI team moved in a tight formation down the corridor, their footsteps absorbed by the institutional rubber flooring that lined the walkway between cell doors. Cole's cell was the 4th on the right. He was awake when they opened it. He was sitting on the edge of his bunk in institutional clothing, and his contraband phone, one of 2, was in his hand. The screen was active. The call log showed an outgoing attempt to one of the farmside network numbers placed at 4:48 a.m. The call had not connected. The farm team had cut the network's communication window by breaching 1 minute ahead of Cole's first alert. 30 seconds. That had been the planned margin. They had made it with 30 seconds to spare. The second contraband phone was recovered from a concealment point behind a ceiling tile in Cole's cell, a location that the informant had described to TBI agents 6 weeks earlier. The phone was powered on and had received 3 incoming messages in the 15 minutes prior to the cell entry. All 3 were from numbers associated with the farmside distribution network. Their content reflected normal operational communication, inventory questions, a delivery confirmation request, messages sent to a man who was already in handcuffs as they arrived. Cole was walked in shackles across the facility yard as dawn broke. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten, a pale gray that gave no warmth. A federal transfer van was waiting at the gate. He did not speak to any of the agents present. A correctional officer who had worked Cole's cell block for 2 years later told investigators that in all that time, he had never heard Cole raise his voice, express frustration, or give any outward indication of the enterprise he was operating. He had been, by the officer's description, entirely unremarkable. At the farm, the outer perimeter sweep had located 2 men in the east lot, the source of the unidentified vehicle. One was detained at the rear outbuilding door, where he had apparently been stationed as an overnight watch. He had a key ring in his jacket pocket. One attempted to move into the tree line and was located by the K-9 unit within 3 minutes. Neither was armed. Both were transported without incident. The key ring recovered from the man at the outbuilding door contained 3 keys. One fit the padlock on the false wall access point. By 6:15 a.m., the farm was fully secured. By 7 a.m., all 10 street-side defendants had been transported to the federal processing facility in Nashville. By 8:30 a.m., Cole had been processed for federal transfer and was en route to a facility where contraband phone concealment was structurally more difficult. The seized burner phone from Cole's cell was bagged and transported to the DEA Nashville evidence facility. According to agents present, it was still receiving incoming messages when it was powered down for logging. Unanswered orders from a distribution network that did not yet know the man giving them was gone. 11 defendants. 10 at the farm, 1 at the prison. The federal indictment, returned by a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee, charged the group with conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, maintaining a drug premises, and a forced labor statute violation carrying its own sentencing exposure independent of the narcotics charges. The forced labor count was the element that the outer network had apparently not anticipated as a federal exposure risk. The 7 men held in the milking parlor had been recruited by a labor contractor contact tied to one of the farm-side defendants, a man named in the indictment under an alias who had previously operated informal construction labor placement in the Nashville corridor. Recruitment was conducted on the offer of $40 per hour for roofing work. Transportation was arranged. The men were driven to the Bledsoe County farm instead. Once there, they were not free to leave. The detail in the indictment that stands out, a line that reads almost like an administrative note but carries everything in it, is this. The padlock on the false wall access point was keyed to a single lock, and that key was found in the pocket of the man detained at the rear outbuilding door on the morning of the raid. 1 key, 1 padlock, 49 days. Now, here's the controversial take, and it's a specific one. 11 defendants is a clean headline, but the labor placement chain that made the recruitment of those 7 men possible was not a spontaneous criminal invention. The pipeline for recruiting day laborers through informal placement networks, then routing them to controlled locations, has been documented in multiple Middle Tennessee federal cases over the prior 3 years. The indictment addresses 11 people. It does not address the structural vulnerability in informal labor markets that made this particular recruitment invisible for 49 days. That is a question no indictment answers. The narcotics investigation itself ran cleanly to resolution. The intercept evidence from Cole's contraband phones, combined with the physical evidence recovered at the farm, packaging materials, scales, sealed product, and financial records, supported the manufacturing and distribution charges across all 11 defendants. Quantities involved placed the operation at a distribution volume consistent with a mid-tier regional network. Not the largest case in Middle Tennessee's federal docket. Large enough to have supplied rural distribution nodes across 4 counties for an undetermined period before the investigation closed it. Several questions the case file leaves open. The 2 contraband phones recovered from Cole's cell were forensically analyzed. Call records showed communication with individuals beyond the 11 people indicted, contacts that agents described in post-indictment briefings as peripheral associates or logistical supports whose involvement did not reach the evidentiary threshold for the current indictment. Those individuals were not charged. Their current status is not reflected in publicly available court records. The financial structure of the network, specifically how cash revenue from distribution was moved back toward Cole and what mechanism was used to manage his prison-side financial interests, was partially reconstructed from the intercept record but not fully mapped in the indictment. A quantity of currency recovered at the farm accounted for a portion of the expected revenue. The gap between the estimated distribution volume and the recovered currency is substantial. What's surprising isn't the gap itself. Cash recovery in drug cases almost always runs short of estimated proceeds. What's surprising is the specific method the intercept suggested was being used. Informal transfers through a legitimate-facing small business in the Rhea County corridor, a business whose principals are referenced in the case file only as unindicted co-conspirators. That business continues operating. What would you have done with that information on the morning of December 5th? 11 targets in custody, 7 people receiving medical care, a case ready for the grand jury, and a business in Rhea County that probably knew more than it officially should have. Push the indictment and take the clean win? Or hold the file open and wait for evidence on the business that may never come? Comment with your answer. We read every one. The meter reader, Marcus Hollis, was not present at the raid. He was on his regular route in Sequatchie County on the morning of December 5th, reading meters on the same gravel lanes he had driven for 11 years, logging numbers into the same system, moving from address to address in the pale winter light. He learned about the operation when his supervisor called him at approximately 9 a.m. to tell him that the anomalous power draw he had flagged 3 weeks earlier had turned out to be significant. Hollis told his supervisor that he had mostly just done what the manual said and called it in. His supervisor told him that was exactly right. There is a detail in the TVA internal log from November 18th that the formal case record does not amplify. When Hollis filed his anomaly flag, he listed the property as drawing 11,400 kilowatt-hours. The TVA district average for a comparably sized rural residential structure in November, between 800 and 1,200 kilowatt-hours. The reading he logged was between 9 and 14 times the residential norm. For a vacant foreclosed property, 9 to 14 times. That number couldn't exist in a legitimate context. Hollis did not know exactly what it meant. He knew it meant something was wrong. He filed the flag and wrote one additional line about curtained windows and no visible vehicles. That additional line reached Claire Weston at the sheriff's office. Weston ran the address and forwarded it to Keene. Keene saw the geographic match to his intercept pattern. The rest follows from there. 3 people between the anomaly and the federal case. A utility worker, a duty sergeant, and a DEA agent. No informant inside the organization turned at the last minute. No dramatic confrontation that cracked a witness. A power reading on a Tuesday afternoon, routed through a county liaison office, matched against an active intercept file. That is the thread. Hollis pulled one end of it. 11 people have been charged. Federal proceedings in the Middle District of Tennessee are ongoing as of July 2026. Cole remains in federal custody pending trial. The 7 men recovered from the Bledsoe County farmhouse were transferred to ICE Victim Coordination Services following their medical evaluation. Their cases have been processed through an administrative track separate from the criminal prosecution. Their names do not appear in the public docket. What the case file records about them ends at the point of their transfer to federal victim services. What came after? The particulars of their cases, whether they returned to Nashville or went elsewhere, what they made of 49 days they were not supposed to survive publicly, is not in the file. The Rhea County business remains open. The 2 peripheral contacts identified in Cole's phone records, individuals who communicated with the network but were not indicted, have not been publicly named. The farm itself, the bank-owned foreclosure on the county road south of Pikeville, was processed as a federal evidence site and then returned to the custody of First Covenant Rural Bank. It is listed as bank-owned property. The TVA meter on the property now reads consistent with a vacant structure. Somewhere around 60 kilowatt-hours last billing cycle. The kind of phantom load that means nothing. A forgotten circuit breaker that nobody has gone back to flip. Marcus Hollis still drives his route. Every vacant property he reads, he checks twice. 11 people were indicted. The network that employed them was built on a demand that the indictment does not address and the sentencing will not reduce. The phone in Cole's cell was still buzzing when they powered it down. Nobody on the other end of those messages has been publicly